Global Business Insights podcast from PS Learning, featuring your hosts Dr. Charlotte de Brabant and Max Kent, bringing you the leading global experts and thought leaders from all industry sectors to give you cutting-edge key insights into the future of business, technology and thought leadership.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining our Global Business Insight podcast with this week's guest, Alex, and of course my partner in crime, Max. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for listening once again. And today's topic is going to be on the future of travel. So I'm so excited to have Alex on the line with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex. Maybe we could just start off by quickly introducing yourself. Maybe you could just say a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte, and thanks to Max for inviting me on the show. Yeah, so I run a business called the Seven Figure Traveler, and essentially it's a coaching and mentoring business to show people the potential of their travel business by seeing the potential of themselves. And it revolves around two particular areas, and one is information and the other is about confidence. As you know, the internet is such a massive place, and knowing the right information and what is the right information to get the skill sets you need to be good in the travel space, it's really important. And of course, confidence is about implementation. So I say, to become a travel professional is a bit like a journey. You need to make the first step and to keep making further steps afterwards. But the beauty of the travel industry is that it's always been surrounded by technology. And, whether you are traveling for business or for pleasure, or whether you're just doing the school run, the daily commute or the weekly shop, the principles of travel remain the same. But technology, as we're about to discuss, is going to change, and it constantly changes. So yeah, it's a fascinating area.
Okay, so this podcast, certainly in the first few episodes, we've really focused on the future of how AI and new technologies is going to affect the particular industry you work in. So, first question around that for you, Alex, what do you think the future of travel is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think there's two sides of it you need to look at. First is I would describe as the physical. So let's say cars, lorries and buses, for instance. The really big thing that's going to change those systems over the next few years is going to be battery technology. We're seeing its gradual interaction, if you like, with the industry as we know it. And I think that the two places that you're going to notice most are going to be like bus services, local lorry journeys. A lot of them are being replaced. There are many examples around the world where the journey times, the distances are concerned, and you know what's going to happen. Those are very definite areas that you're going to see fairly immediate changes. On cars, I think it's still an open question. I think even Elon Musk will say that it's going to happen, autonomous vehicles, but there's a question of human confidence. I think he put the answer somewhere between 10,000 and 10 million. So that's how good the technology has to be before humans deem it confident. They'll be confident to use the technology. If you look at trains, they're kind of already making moves forward. That they're not only faster and lighter, but the thing that I've really seen a lot of change, and I think we can expect a lot of change, is in how trains get signaled between destinations. I grew up in South Oxfordshire, and that's in the middle of England. And when I was a kid, it used to take nearly an hour and a half to get into London, a distance of only 50 odd miles. Now you can get there in 30 minutes, and it's down to two key aspects. Firstly, it's the route is now fully electrified, The train sets are twice the length, but the technology behind the signaling now means that the driver is only doing half what they used to do, yet they need to be more technically proficient than ever before. Planes have seen massive changes. They're not only lighter and more fuel efficient, whereas in the old days, the thing that got my interest was that everything had to be 4 engines because people were worried that there'd be failures en route, and they were incredibly well, they weren't fuel efficient. They were noisy. They were polluting. It needed multiple people to start them up. But these days, 2-engine aircraft are the thing. They not only are better, they go much further than ever before. Even cargo ships, I'm just amazed at the size of the ships that now take all our goods and services around the world. It's absolutely amazing. So that's the physical side. The software side, well, they used to say there's an app for it, but now I think you have to think in terms of apps in the plural, because there simply isn't one way to access products and services now. I always think of it, if you think of it as layers of a cake, one on top of the other. I go back to give you a few examples. When I used to buy movies or rent movies in the 1980s, they used to come on these things called VHS cassettes, and they'd only be 1 or 2 players, and you would get your rental and you'd send it back. And later on, it changed to CDs and then DVDs. There were a few more players, a few more people offering the services. And now we got the internet, it's streaming. But the thing that happened as a result of it is that the content that used to be in a single place is now, like in pockets, being shared amongst loads of different providers. So there's no longer a single place to get your catalogue of movies. And it's kind of that sort of thing has now moved into the social media space. There was a time at the beginning of the internet, people used to ask me, what is email, Alex? And I'd have to explain what that was. But now social media has come up. You can DM people, but now everybody's thinking, oh, well, if you can do that on Facebook, you can do it on my platform as well. So that you've got this distributed network of how you communicate with people now. And that is really, well, it's good, it's diverse, but it's making it more challenging to stay in touch with people. I now have to think about which platform people are on before I start contacting them. So the software space is amazing, but you have to be more aware of what's happening. There's a tremendous amount of choice, and the market is expanding all the time.
Alex, thank you so much for this fantastic answer, especially discussing all these elements of plane and car and absolutely the world has changed. And I would say the most drastic change, though, has taken place very much just a few years ago, when we were all stuck at home and when we all had to switch overnight into being a lot more digital and having virtual meetings, virtual conferences, just like our podcast now. I mean, all these technologies have very much risen, I would say, frankly speaking, just over the last years, that now it's become the new normal. And that being said, how has the pandemic per se affected the travel industry, and how do you see it then recovering in the future?
Yeah, in some respects, obviously the pandemic did have an effect, and it curtailed the industry. But I've seen plenty of examples where people during the lockdown periods, which was different depending on which part of the world you was, it's changed. People changed to cargo, and also there was kind of an experimentation going on where goods and services still needed to be distributed, but it went via a combination of lorries and trains. The interesting thing about, from a recovery sense, is that what I've noticed is that far from curtailing the demand, actually there's been a pent-up feeling. People have really wanted to get back into travel, and there's plenty of evidence out there now that people are prepared to give up all kinds of activity in favor of prioritizing, the travel experience. And if you need any other further evidence, you only have to look at how much people and companies spend on travel in the much wider sense. Prior to the pandemic, the travel sector was worth over $1 trillion. Yes, it was pushed back a little, but the demand is so strong, and that people are desperate to travel. And yeah, well, I can see it, easily matching that soon, and maybe even doubling it in the future. It's a really strong space.
Okay, so I think for some of our listeners, worth explaining, Alex, that you've got a background in IT as well, and obviously have a deep knowledge of systems and solutions. So really keen to see how you've applied that in your new business, and really about how that applies to travel. So, if you could go into more of the technological advancements that you might see from your perspective coming in to transform the travel industry. And I think, given our listeners on this, not just in terms of personal travel, but for corporations offering travel management solutions, that kind of thing as well.
Well, I think the sort of advances that we're likely to see are more fully automated systems. We briefly talked about it already, but confidence is going to increase in these different areas, and I think full automation is going to happen at some point. Driverless technologies, like on trains. There was a time where you'd never think such a thing would happen. I've been showing a bit of interest in what's been going on in Sydney, Australia. They're really pushing hard on having just a distributed city, so all business not necessarily taking part in one part of the city, but really expanding out and having multiple cities. And that's going to happen by a series of expansions for driverless trains. I mean, it's an incredibly interesting project. We recently had obviously the new train system through London, the Elizabeth line, which is an interesting mix of technologies, because the challenge of delivering it, I know people said, oh, it took too long, it was too expensive and so on, but because it's a mixed technology environment, you had to cope with multiple signaling systems. It had a dedicated section underneath the city, which could be fully autonomous if they wanted to, but they have to have drivers that understand 3 different technologies. It's incredibly technical. On the aeroplane front, believe it or not, there are already fully electric aeroplanes being tested, and there's a particular blogger I follow who actually was looking at a 3 or 4 person aircraft that could fly for about an hour, and I looked at it and I thought it didn't look like an aeroplane at all. I mean, if you've ever watched the cartoon character The Jetsons, it really reminded me of that. It just looked like a bubble surrounded by 26 fans that just sort of made you hover up, and I thought, my goodness, it's just like the old cartoons I used to watch. It's incredible what is being tested at the moment. It's a concept idea, but people are seriously developing these things. And of course, the first stage in all kinds of development is that there has to be a concept. People come and see it. They're looking for investors, and it's incredible what people are looking at. Another thing I think is worth mentioning is that in the private aeroplane space, where people will happily, at a moment's notice, spend 25, 30 million upwards for a new plane, the one particular company is developing essentially a red button, so that if your sole pilot was to develop a medical problem, you just pull the button and the IT system in the backbone will coordinate all of the air traffic control systems, medical services, will work out which airport to safely land at. And I thought, wow, somebody's actually thought of all this. So it's almost, it has been done for safety, but you can see that in future, and even the future is now, that people who fly planes, they don't need to fly planes. They practically fly themselves. It's incredibly interesting. Another area which I'm watching with very particular interest is this project called Project Sunrise by an airline in Australia, who they were working with both Boeing and Airbus, and they've come up with an Airbus solution to fly people point to point to anywhere in the world. And it could well be in service next year. And it's really taking advantage of how aircraft may look in the future, which is an interchangeable aircraft. And I think it's been pushed by the pandemic in a way, but I think it's been in the running for a little while. But if you imagine very long flights, it's not just a case of what do I do for 20 plus hours. It's how our bodies react to being in the air for so long. And part of that is getting a good night's sleep. And of course, at the moment, the people that benefit from that opportunity are people who are willing to pay for business and first class seating. So how do you provide it for the 300 plus other passengers? Well, the idea they've come up is slightly based on what the Japanese do, which is they offer sleeping pods. So imagine a section of the hold that has been, which is now no longer cargo, but is now a sleeping area, which you may hire for the entire flight or just for 2 or 3 hours at a time. So it's bringing travel. It's an interesting idea that's going to bring travel to the masses. And I think it's also altered the thinking of several companies coming back from the pandemic. Whereas before they would send their planes off for refurbishment to have all their seats removed, now they're saying to manufacturers, in future, you must think about planes that can be either people or cargo. And I can essentially, it's like a giant Meccano set. You just either pull out seats and put cargo space in and vice versa. And it'll be very much a demand. And that flexibility will mean that new planes don't have to be massive as jumbo jets. They can be small single aisle devices that can go to multiple destinations. So I think there's a lot of interesting technology coming up, and it's a question of watching the space, as I say.
Oh, how interesting, especially what an innovative project. But whenever we talk about air travel and then private air travel, as you were talking about, how do you see sustainability and eco-friendly travel playing a role in the future of travel?
Yeah, it's kind of a two-part story. And this is where we're going to slightly step into the sci-fi, because I think the answer to your question is really what we do on the planet and what we may do off the planet in the future. I've been following a few people that are very interested in ecotourism, and there's certainly a growing interest in this area, especially from the youth. And I think the sort of things that people are interested in now are like things like mindfulness and awareness, particularly awareness, because I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware that their actions can cause repercussions on the opposite side of the world. So there's very much thinking about the impact of actions, respecting other cultures and traditions, and a need, I think, to have a more resourcefulness approach to travel. So reducing miles, reducing the necessity to move people and material. I was looking at a particular problem that was being highlighted, is that there's a lot of island chains in the Pacific, which are only 10 foot or so in places above sea level. And of course, sea level is something that is very pertinent at the moment. If you think of the Maldives, a lot of people like going to the Maldives, but it's one of those places which is at risk. So you do very much need to be aware of your actions. The only thing is, there is a demand for this, but the thing is, can you scale it? That's the thing, because all the examples I've seen have been small scale. So I think that is one of those things that we'll need to develop. The other thing we need to be aware of is that there are not only massive industries out there that are contributing to this, but there are countries, there are certain very large countries, they know who they are, we don't need to say their names, but there are certain very large countries that are very, very industrialized, and they could be described as creating not necessarily overwhelming problems, but problems that we need to deal with nevertheless. Now, that may be something that in future could actually happen off the planet. Now, it's funny this, because only a few years ago, any talk of doing things off the planet, you'd be like sent off to cuckoo land. But now, at some point, we could be living off the planet. And there are companies actively developing technologies on how to build factories in a low gravity environment, and do it by using material that already exists on the planets. I mean, it's really sci-fi stuff, but the fact that people are actively looking into this increasingly is making this a real possibility, because it means you don't have to take so much stuff with you. So in terms of being sustainable and eco-friendly, it may well be that the things that we consider to be extremely dirty and polluting may be replaceable or movable off our planet, and that could make an extraordinary difference. I know last month there was this accident with a starship, which is attracting a lot of interest, but the thing about it is it's a reusable device, and it's already been proven that you can now send rockets into space for at least 1/10 of the price that we used to, and that's going to make an amazing difference. And as we speak, 5 or 6 starships are being built every month. Now, it's a long way from the target of 1,000 that has been estimated that we would need should we wish to go on a big trip to Mars. But again, it's an evolving story, and you can imagine that the people behind it are thinking, how are we going to scale it up? And that's the thing that's going to make a real difference.
Yes, I mean, don't get me started on the Maldives and you know, the sea levels and everything else and space travel. So I think we could go right down a rabbit hole, because I'm a firm believer in you know, the fact that that is probably the future, and perhaps there was life on Mars before we knew anything about it, and probably civilizations that were here before us as well. So I think that's all to play for, and there's a lot more information coming about that sort of stuff, and it's all linked to travel, and certainly sea travel as well. So really interesting stuff, and really interesting to hear your take on it. the next thing we wanted to sort of go into is sort of carries on from that. So I think it's going to have a big factor into it is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and some of those things around virtual augmented reality. How do you think they're gonna help with this sort of travel as well? And do speak about the future of travel and how that might look for off world travel as well.
Yeah, I think AI and machine learning, yeah, it's really seemed to be accelerating. When you think of machines, I used to work in, as part of my IT experience, I used to work in the medical industry, and I saw automatic machines in motion. It's extraordinary what you can do with machines. But the limiting factors with them was that they were task-based machines. They could only do one thing at a time, as good as they were. They worked incredibly quickly, and when they worked well, it was the humans that had to speed up, not the machines, to keep up with the work that they did. I've been reading a little bit about the huge car factory that now exists in Austin, Texas. And then shortly after that, I read a story about another similar factory that's going to be built in Mexico. And that one location in itself is going to be building 20 million cars a year, which is going to be bigger than all the other factories for the entire planet being built in one place. But the limiting factor of machines is that you're putting material in one end, and hopefully something really interesting is going to come out at the other end. But the real change, I think, is when we combine the physical with AI, and that is where this project in the making called Artemis, which is essentially mobile robots with AI built in. I think that is really going to change the game quite significantly. But you've got to think of, well, what information are these machines going to contain? And it's really based on this idea that's been around for a while, which we call big data. And I've been actively using a product that people are talking about at the moment called ChatGPT, which is essentially an encyclopedia. And it's a machine that's been taught a lot of stuff about the world around it, and travel is just one of those things. And I've been using it as something I like to lean on as a research tool. And as part of that, I found out about another product called AutoGPT. And I looked at this because essentially what this product is, it's Google for GPT. So if you think of all the things you may be doing already on ChatGPT, this is essentially connecting the internet to the encyclopedia, and it basically compares all the things you were searching for before, but now it will check it against current events, current searching, and it's incredibly interesting. Now, because ChatGPT was invented by somebody we all know, and then he sold it, and then it was purchased by another company, he decided he didn't like what his original baby was doing, so he's now created another a competitor to ChatGPT, which is called XI. Now, apparently, we now know why he purchased Twitter. It's because Twitter is also a big data company too. So, but there's nothing wrong with competition, I say. So I think the AI space will only grow for it. And as I said, the robot project, really, I would describe it as like convergence technology, where AI will move with you. And I think one of the two things I would say that's interesting about this is that the capability of machines doing jobs that humans no longer want to do. Now, I know our best friend has said that one day there will be more robots than humans, but I think essentially we'll be sending them off the planet because, as anybody who follows space travel will know, is that it's not a particularly human-friendly place at the moment, and the most ideal job for a robot will be to go and do things other places where we will happily give them loads of tasks and they will spend all their time doing things for us. In terms of how I think travel will benefit from AI, is essentially it will be good because it will allow us to collate a lot of information. The only thing I really question about it is how will we measure the value of that information going forward? And what I mean by that is it accurate? Is the answers we get back the best information? As Dr. Spock would always say to Captain Kirk, you should look at it logically. But the thing about humans is that we are spontaneous. I can imagine people using AI to organize all of their travel, but whether that is, the best solution for them is another matter. Because I think it's down to the intangibles. There are some products of beer which allegedly can reach all the parts, but AI cannot currently reach all those parts. You think of people bantering in markets or buying things for cash or asking for mates rates or trying to cut out the middleman. That's the intangible that AI can't currently reach. So yes, I'm looking forward to what's next.
Thank you so much, Alex. And just to continue the flow of the new technologies, in your opinion, what role will smart devices and the IoT, the Internet of Things, actually play in the future of travel?
I think to a certain extent it already does. If you think about what your mobile phone is doing, it knows where you are all the time. If you think about large factories, they contain lots of moving parts. Airports are very good examples, tracking passengers and luggage. I fairly recently was on a trip out to Spain, and I went to Madrid. And one thing I didn't realize about Madrid airport is that some of the terminals are about 4 kilometers apart, and that requires a very long metro trip back to the main terminal to collect my luggage. And what was really interesting is rather than hide everything, they just have a big cavern, and as you travel on the metro between the terminals, you also see all the traffic going on below you. And I swear I saw my luggage overtake me on the way to the main building. It was quite a surreal experience, but it just shows you the importance of everything working together. When you check your luggage in, it's not just a barcode. You are initiating a whole series of events, so that when you actually reach the carousel, the thing that you want most is there waiting for you, and it's the magic, and we don't always see that. In the future, I think these things are going to be incredibly more important because projects are getting more and more complex. I saw an example of this in Singapore. They're extending artificial islands in order to introduce a huge cargo facility. So essentially, machines are going to unload cargo, place it on a port facility, drones are going to be supervising the entire operation, and a very large part of the cargo operation in Singapore is going to be almost fully automated. They are destined to complete this project by the year 2040. In Western Sydney Airport, which is essentially not going to replace the existing airport, but is a completely brand new project, is a highly complex. And when I saw various interviews of the progress they were making, they were asked which floor they were on. They didn't actually know. And actually, it wasn't a great surprise, because new airports are phenomenally large places, and you don't necessarily know what floor you're on because they go deep underground as well. In 2008, I volunteered and was selected to help with the Heathrow Terminal 5 testing, me and 5,000 other people. And it was absolutely fascinating to see part of the airport which wasn't open, and you start at the bottom and you work your way up. I mean, it's absolutely cavernous, with no actual paying customers in there. And we were essentially left to play with the toys. We all were given imaginary destinations. We picked up luggage, and we stress tested a new airport, and we got to see places that normal passengers wouldn't normally see. No, it's absolutely fascinating. The main thing, of course, is not to get lost.
Indeed. Well, yeah, just one final question from us, really. Just on this has all been incredibly enlightening, and yeah, just it's great to hear it all. The one thing left to talk about just briefly is just on the sharing economy, where there's more of the sort of internet kind of economy, and those sort of sites like Airbnb and those sort of things have made it easier for people to travel in a different way, and people that perhaps wouldn't have the opportunity to visit certain locations and certain places. Do you see more of that in the future and having more of an impact?
Yeah, I think it has. I think it has a very important part to play. Again, it's part of what I was saying before about layers, and I think it makes the travel industry more competitive. And it does it because the travel industry is becoming a little bit more distributed. So when you go on a service like Airbnb, you're not necessarily seeing every travel product available, but it is built in such a way that it gives you almost a Google type experience. You get to see not only the accommodation that's available, but a lot of them show you what's around the accommodation, what else you can experience whilst you're in the area. And I think that's incredibly powerful approach. And I think that's probably why, as one example of one particular platform, why it's very successful in the space. It also shows that the travel economy is very fluid. There's a tremendous amount of variation, and if you're prepared to look under the hood, you can see a lot more options than just accepting, one way of traveling or one kind of property or one kind of journey. So it's best to assume that what you're looking for isn't necessarily all in the same place, but the opportunity for you to establish direct relationships is actually better in this space. So I often have come into contact with, I don't know, either hotels or stays away, and they slightly grumble because, oh, well, we're glad that you had a good time, but only if you had to contact us directly, you might have had a better deal. So there is a mix and match. So sometimes you might prefer to get it all done in one place, but in others, I think it's nice to think that there is another way of doing things, and the internet is the place that can happen.
Alex, I cannot thank you enough for all your incredible thought leadership today on the future of travel. So many very incredible case studies and examples and projects. My goodness, you bring so much experience to the table. So thank you very much for your time and joining us today. And especially
Absolutely.
also to our listeners for joining us to another episode of our podcast series. And we really hoped and hope that you enjoyed exploring the future of travel with us today. As always, we encourage you to stay curious and keep exploring. Stay tuned to what the next episodes are to come. And until then, travel safe and happy travels.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
The Global Business Insights podcast from PS Learning, featuring your hosts, Dr. Charlotte de Brabant and Max Kent.